we'll try that again. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Anna and this is What a Ghoul Wants. I am your ghoul and what I want is to talk about the movies that I watched during June. So June is actually the first month that I've really started to use my Letterboxd account. And for those who don't know, Letterboxd is a kind of like a social media site to track your movies that you've watched, write reviews, rank them, look at other people's reviews and things like that. So I found that I really actually enjoy using Letterboxd now, especially to keep track of the movies that I've watched, because I find that I will watch something and then completely forget when I did, how long it's been, what I thought of it. So being able to write down my thoughts and feelings as I watch the movie is super helpful, and I've really enjoyed my Letterboxd. If you're on there, please feel free to follow me. I will have my Letterboxd linked in my description, and I would love to follow you back and be friends on there and look at your reviews and things like that. So please feel free to follow me on there. So I'm a little bit late to the game on my June watches. I know that we are already a couple of days into July, but June was kind of a busy month for me. I've kind of been bouncing around a lot, been out of town, so I didn't watch quite as many movies in the month of June as I thought I would have, or as I normally do in a normal month. But for some reason, June was just really busy and I didn't have time to watch as many movies. But I would love to talk about the movies that I did watch. I think I've got maybe around 10 or 11 listed, so not a ton, but I still love to talk about them. And the first movie that I watched in June was Urban Legends Final Cut. For those who've watched my previous video, you'll know that I actually did a longer review on that film. I'll have that linked as well if you want to check that out, so I won't go into too much detail on it here, but I will say I gave it 4 stars and a heart, and I just really thought that it was a super fun 2000s slasher. It was just what I wanted to watch in the moment, which was really nice. So I had a lot of fun with it. There are a lot of recognizable faces in it from the early 2000s. A couple people from Legally Blonde pop up, so it was fun to see them in sort of different roles. The premise was cool, and as far as sequels go, I thought it was a really good sequel. In my Letterboxd review, I say that I was pleasantly surprised by this movie because I just did not have super high expectations for it. And it was just a fun early 2000s romp of a horror movie, so I would suggest checking that one out if you have the time. Alright, the second movie that I watched in June was Eden Lake from 2008. I had heard a lot of positive things about this movie. I didn't know the exact premise before I watched it, but I did know that a lot of people do enjoy the movie. I only gave it 2.5 stars, and my only review for it was "fuck them kids." If you've seen the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. Basically, a couple goes to a lake to relax, and the man in the relationship is planning on proposing to the woman. So they're just there to have a relaxing vacation, but there are some kids there that, we'll just say, cause them a lot of problems. I thought that there were things that this movie did well. Certain parts were pretty compelling. I thought that our two main characters, their acting was pretty good. And I think that the children's acting was relatively good as well. It was more of just like the premise and the execution. I guess I just kind of wanted more from it. I didn't really understand why the kids were being so mean and so cruel. We got a little bit of backstory for like the main kid of this, I guess you could call it a gang. He is having some issues at home, and we can kind of see how that would affect how he's interacting with the other people in his life, or why he is acting out in this way, but it wasn't strong enough for me to see why he was being so cruel. And the fact that the other kids went along with it for as long as they did, I felt like it was just a little bit too exaggerated for me. That being said, if you like movies where there's sort of a cat and mouse, where the bad guys are trying to find the good guys and they're trying to get away. You'll probably like this movie. Our lead actress, I felt like she was pretty resourceful and smart, so I did like that about it. I don't know, it was just something about the tone, something about the execution that just didn't do it for me, and I think I just wanted to like it more than I did. And the next movie that I watched is not a horror film, but it's been on my watch list for a really long time, so I'm really glad that I got to finally see it, and that is But I'm a Cheerleader from 1999. This movie was so good. I enjoyed it so much. If you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend that you do. Natasha Lyonne is great in it. As well as Clea Duvall. They're kind of our two main characters. Natasha Lyonne's character is sent to a gay conversion camp because her parents think that she's a lesbian and they're trying to turn her straight, basically. And there she makes friends with a bunch of other queer kids, and it's them navigating their time at this camp and discovering who they really are and realizing that the gender roles that society wants to place on them, as well as the heteronormativity, is just absolutely ludicrous and absurd. And that's really hit home with the exaggeration of the things they're doing at this camp. And it's really punctuated by the super bright color scheme and the costuming. I absolutely loved the look of this film. All of the colors and the sets were just amazing and very eye-catching. As well as the soundtrack. The soundtrack was killer. I would absolutely just listen to that, when I'm driving around or something. It was super fun. So I gave But I'm a Cheerleader 4.5 stars and a heart because I absolutely loved it so much. The half star off was really just for little nitpicky things that have to do with it being from 1999. But overall, I would say please watch this movie. I urge you to. It is honestly a cultural touchstone, I feel like. And I think it just doesn't get talked about enough in general. I know that's kind of a cult classic, but I really think this movie deserves even more recognition than it already has. So please watch this movie. And the next movie I watched is the 2012 version of The Woman in Black. Yes, this is the one with Daniel Radcliffe starring as the young lawyer who is sent to a remote village to sort through some papers from a client who has passed away. And there he's encountering a lot of spooky, creepy things happening in relation to this woman in black who is a ghostly figure who's sort of haunting this town and causing the kids in the town to kill themselves, basically. I gave this movie 2.5 stars, and I just said, wasn't terrible, wasn't great either. I remember seeing this movie, I think when it came out in 2012, I believe in the theaters, and I kind of had the same thoughts about it as I did on this rewatch. I thought that there were some things that it did effectively. Some of the scares were pretty good. The costuming is really fabulous and well done, and the set pieces, all that kind of stuff, the atmosphere was pretty good. It just felt like there were a lot of cliches happening. I will say that the ending is something that you don't necessarily expect, and I honestly kind of respect the movie for going the way that it did. I just wish that I was a little more invested in it. I think that old period pieces can be done really well. There was something about this movie that left me wanting more. I do think Daniel Radcliffe did a really good job, and I think that coming right off of the Harry Potter movies, he really wanted to do something different, and I think he did achieve that with this movie. It wasn't my favorite, so that's why I gave it 2.5 stars right in the middle. The next movie on my watch list for June is the 2009 cult classic Jennifer's Body. For those who follow me on Instagram, you probably know that I really love this movie. I gave it 4 stars and a heart on Letterboxd and said, it's by no means perfect, but I love it. I think it's a movie that is now being appreciated for what it is, which it just took, 10 plus years for that to happen. But as far as it being a super aware of itself, playing up the camp of that era while also still being pretty scary. Some of the scenes in it are honestly more gruesome than I remembered, but it's so tongue-in-cheek, and I just really appreciate the humor that Diablo Cody was able to inject into the script. And Karen Kusama did just such a fabulous job with directing it. Yes, of course, there are problems with this movie. Some things that just don't play out very well from it being from 2009. Some of the language that's used, not quite PC, but if you can overlook those things, not overlook them, but just understand the time that it was coming from. I think this movie is one that we will continue to talk about in the horror community for years and years to come. It's also just such an interesting piece of queer representation in horror. And for me, being bisexual, it was kind of an awakening sort of movie. Just the kiss between Jennifer and Needy. Need I say more? You guys know. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a movie that I think every horror fan should watch at least once. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's gonna stay in my rotation of frequent watches for years to come. All right, next up is Alone in the Dark from 1982. This movie is actually on the list of Fangoria's 101 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen, which is a series that I'm going to be doing. I'm still in the process of getting it started. I just really want it to be perfect for you all, so it's taking me a little longer than expected, but it is the second movie on that list of 101 movies. And so I don't want to go into too much detail here because I will have a full video on this in the future. I'll just give you my rating for it. I gave it 2 stars. I wasn't a huge fan of it. Again, I'm going to go into more detail on this in another video, but it's Donald Pleasence as kind of a wacky psychiatrist in this new age treatment facility for people with mental illnesses, and there is a power outage, which causes those people to break out of the facility and kind of run amok in this town. And that's all I'll say about it. It's an 80s slasher that I just didn't care for. Alright, the next movie on my list is Alice, Sweet Alice from 1976. This is also on my list of Fangoria's 101 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen, and it will be the first video that I release since I'm going in alphabetical order. So again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. For those who already know, and I know I've mentioned it on here before, but my handle on Instagram is Anna Sweet Anna, and it's named after that movie, so I do have a soft spot for it, and I just really enjoy it on the whole. So I gave it 4 stars and a heart, and this is a rewatch, of course, for me, in preparation for the 101 Best Horror Movies You've Never Seen series. But just know there is a full video coming where I'm going to go super into detail with it, so don't worry, I will cover it in the future. But again, I love it, it's great. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. Alright, the next movie on my watch list is In Search of Darkness Part 2, and this is from 2020, and it is a sort of sequel or second installment in the In Search of Darkness documentary series, which covers solely 80s movies, 80s horror movies. So it just goes in chronological order from 1980 to 1989 and just talks about different horror movies from each year and focuses in on them, talks to a lot of people that worked on the films, actors, directors, special effects artists, things like that. I am a sucker for any sort of horror documentary. I want more of them. Please give me all the horror documentaries. That's exactly what I said in my Letterboxd review. I just want to dig in deep to the 90s, 2000s, 70s, every era. I believe that the people who made this documentary are working on a 90s documentary of the same style. So I am super excited for that. I cannot wait for that to come out, and I hope that they just keep giving us this content because I will eat it up every time. I think the documentary is like 3, maybe edges into 4 hours long. I can't remember. It's really long. But it's just really great to throw on and see them talk about movies that you love or ones you've never heard of before, so you can add those to your watch list here on your Letterboxd and check them out because it's amazing hearing all the behind the scenes stories, and I absolutely love that kind of stuff. So I would recommend watching In Search of Darkness Part 2 and Part 1. The next movie on my list is Cruising from 1980. And this is the William Friedkin directed, starring Al Pacino, gay police procedural slasher thriller movie. For those who know, you know, it focuses on the leather gay bar scene in New York City in the 80s. And there is a serial killer that's going around killing these gay men, and Al Pacino is tasked with disguising himself as a gay man to infiltrate the gay scene and try to figure out who the killer is. I gave this movie 3 stars, and in my review I said, did I love it? No. Was I intrigued by it? Yes. The style is very strange. Friedkin directed it in a really specific way to where people all kind of look the same, and you have a really hard time telling people apart, telling who's the killer, who is being targeted. A lot of these people just like also look like Al Pacino. There is a Joe Spinell appearance, which I always love to see other actors from horror movies in other horror movies, and in it he plays like a corrupt New York cop. So keep an eye out for him. It's a very, very sweaty movie. I will say that. Which I think New York in the 80s was, you know, it was kind of like a dirty place to be. So seeing the culture and the gay clubs at this time, I know Friedkin is not a gay man. And so I think the portrayal of the gay community was maybe a little muddled, or people at the time felt like he was not the right person to be telling this story. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack in regards to this movie. And so I think that may have affected my viewing of it. But overall, I would say it's just a very interesting piece of media that focuses on a very specific time frame in a very specific place. So if you like kind of a giallo psychological thriller thing, I would say go ahead and watch. Just proceed with caution that it may not be the best or most accurate representation of the gay community, but especially through a 2021 lens. The next film on my list is Mandy from 2018, and this stars Nicolas Cage, of course. I watched this on an Instagram Live. I've been trying to do those. I've only done 2 so far, but I would really love to do more because I just think they're super fun. I'll throw a movie on and have it playing in the background and talk about it and talk with people who are watching. And sometimes we'll stay on topic and talk about the movie. Other times I kind of get off track and get a little distracted. So while I was watching this movie, that kind of happened. So I didn't give it a rating because I really need to go back and just have a clean watch where it's just me focusing on the film. From what I remember, the visuals were very cool. The lighting was very cool. Some of the scenes were pretty beautiful but strange. And then there were some really brutal moments as well. And from what I remember, Nick Cage did a good job acting. He didn't have a ton of lines, but just his physicality and the few lines that he did have, I thought that he did really well. And I know he's kind of a polarizing figure, but I really would love to check out more of his horror work. I have been wanting to watch Mom and Dad for a long time. I've heard a lot of good things about his acting in that as well, so I really want to see that. And Willy's Wonderland, I know that was a little bit polarizing, but yeah, as far as Mandy goes, I need to rewatch it to give it a fair rating, but I think that it was overall a cool experience, I'll say that. Next on my list is Asylum of Satan from 1972. This movie was, it was bad. It was a very low budget 70s film that wanted so badly to be some sort of Rosemary's Baby-esque thing, lying heavy on the Satan part for sure. Just not very compelling even. I mean, you can have a low budget movie and make it interesting, but this was pretty slow in some parts. There were only a few good, I guess, kills. It wasn't even so bad that it's good kind of watch. It was just kind of meh overall. Yeah, I would say you can definitely skip this one. I only gave it 1.5 stars. And I said just watch All the Colors of the Dark instead, which that is a 70s giallo satanic-based movie that I think does the subject matter much better than Asylum of Satan. So yeah, definitely skip this one. And finally, the last movie I have on my watch list for June was The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. It came out this year. I had only seen the first Conjuring and Conjuring 2 in the Conjuring universe, so as far as context goes, I don't know every single thing about the Conjuring universe by far, so if that affects my viewing of this movie, I don't really know. I'm sure there maybe were some little things that I could have missed that were snuck in there, and references to maybe like the Annabelle movies or The Nun. But as far as a standalone movie, I thought it was pretty good. I gave it 3 stars, and I said I loved Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson's performances. They always kill it as Ed and Lorraine. They're just awesome together. They have great chemistry, and they always give 110% in their performances. And I thought everyone else in the movie acted pretty well. I loved the cinematography as well. A lot of the effects were done super good. Just the way scenes were shot, I think, were really effective. It was more in the storyline that it kind of got me where I took off a couple stars. I wanted to give it a little bit more for those elements that I mentioned earlier, but there were some things that I just had some issues with as far as them sort of giving credence to the whole satanic panic and saying that Ed and Lorraine were right for being able to argue in court that someone killed people because of demonic influences. Just when you look at it historically, it just doesn't play very well for the people that were actually demonized for these sorts of things, even though a lot of those people were simply lived alternative lifestyles or just didn't quite conform to society's normal standards or were simply just scapegoated. And it just kind of tonally was weird for me in that way. And the fact that the villain was just not super compelling or fleshed out. It was kind of just this spooky, scary thing. We're going to demonize, witchcraft and the occult and kind of leave it at that, which I feel like that's already been done a lot, and I think they could have done more with the villain. So I did have some complaints regarding that, but I think if you like the Conjuring movies, definitely watch it if you haven't already. If not for Patrick and Vera, just for their chemistry and their storyline, for the cinematography and the score and the soundtrack were also really good. So yeah, that's all that I watched in June that I caught. I may have missed some movies here or there. I'm going to try to be a lot better about being on top of adding movies to my Letterboxd so that I remember what I watched and how I felt about it. So please, again, follow me on there if you would like to. Follow me on Instagram. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to my channel. I would love to have you here. And I love talking about horror movies, just talking about movies in general. So if you want to be a part of this little community that I'm trying to create, please subscribe and drop a comment below, say hello. Let me know what you watched in June. Also, let me know what I should watch in July. I have seen some things popping up on my radar that are just now available for streaming that I'm going to try to watch for sure. One of those being Near Dark, which I've heard is really hard to find streaming anywhere, and it's on Shudder right now, so I'm absolutely going to watch Near Dark because I've never seen it, and I really, really need to. It's a blind spot in my horror filmography for sure. So yeah, let me know anything I should watch in July. And I did want to point out the shirt I'm wearing is from an artist that I found on Instagram, and the handle is Pink Fang. That's pink with 2 eyes, and they do amazing horror, spooky related art. I got this on their TeePublic store, and everything is super reasonably priced, so please support them, follow them on Instagram, check out their links in their description because they make some amazing horror and spooky related artwork, so please check them out. They're awesome. Thanks again for watching, y'all. I will not take as long to upload a video next time, I promise. Have a great day, and we'll talk horror next time.